At 2:06 a.m. on a Tuesday, there was this 911 call from a locked bathroom that, just fundamentally changed the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, it really did.
But to actually understand the gravity of that night, you can't start with the attacker. You really have to start with a 67 to 67 political tie, a golden retriever named Gilbert, and a woman who just refused to let democracy stall out.
Right. That's the core of it.
So today, welcome to the deep dive. We have a huge stack of sources in front of us: news articles, Department of Justice press releases, some Capitol security documents, and, these incredibly heartfelt public tributes.
Mm-hmm.
We're diving into the tragic events of June 2025, when Minnesota state lawmakers were targeted in a really coordinated attack. But, this is important, we are going to do this differently.
Exactly. Our mission today is to strictly center the victims. We want to really understand who these public servants were, the complex systems that ultimately, failed them, and the enduring legacy they leave behind. The individual who perpetrated this violence is, well, he's not the protagonist of this story. We'll only use his name when we strictly need to for factual clarity. And we definitely won't be exploring his psychology or giving gratuitous details of the crime scene.
No, not at all. We want to look at the people who actually built the laws we live by. So let's start with Melissa Hortman. She was 55 years old, and long before she was this legislative powerhouse, she was just Melissa from the suburbs of Minneapolis. She met her husband, Mark, while they were both volunteering to mentor students.
Which is just so telling about who they were.
Right. They built this beautiful life together, deeply anchored by their love for their golden retriever, Gilbert. And Melissa, she was really defined by persistence. She didn't just inherit power.
No, she had to fight for it.
Yeah, she lost her first two political races in 1998 and 2002 before she finally, won a seat in the Minnesota House in 2004.
And her colleagues, they consistently highlighted her grace and this very sharp, almost disarming sense of humor.
Yes, the sources mention that a lot.
Her unique skill was taking incredibly dense, really complex policy and translating it so the average person could understand why it mattered to their daily life.
Right, which is a rare talent.
It really is.
Yeah.
She eventually became the longest-serving woman speaker in Minnesota history. But what stands out the most in the sources is her capacity as a consensus builder.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, the 2024 elections resulted in this unprecedented 67 to 67 tie in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And in modern politics, a tie usually means absolute gridlock.
Right, which is why her response was so revolutionary. She didn't dig her heels in or, try to force a partisan advantage.
No, she didn't.
She negotiated a historic power-sharing agreement with Republican Representative Lisa DeMuth. I mean, she literally handed over the speaker's gavel to share power.
Yeah, prioritizing a functioning government over total political control.
Exactly. That is an incredibly rare move in today's polarized climate, and I think it tells you exactly who she was.
It does. And alongside the Hortmans, the sources heavily feature Senator John Hoffman. He is 61, a highly dedicated public servant who actually chairs the Human Services Committee. His wife, Yvette, is deeply beloved by her elementary school community. Together, they raised their daughter, Hope. And John is someone who's been years on the school board and on federal interagency councils, focusing specifically on children with special health care needs.
These are people embedded in the literal fabric of their communities. They aren't just figures in a debate on the evening news. They are neighbors.
Exactly.
And when you look at Hortman's ability to build consensus and Hoffman's dedication to vulnerable children, it just makes the sheer brutality of what interrupted their lives that much harder to reconcile.
No, it really does.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like looking at a magnificent stained glass window today. We are going to appreciate the beautiful picture it forms and the light it lets in, rather than focusing on the rock that was thrown through it.
That's a great way to put it. Because on the early morning of June 14th, 2025, that peace was completely shattered. Yeah. The factual reality of that morning is that an attacker named Vance Boelter orchestrated a highly coordinated multi-site assault. At roughly 2:00 a.m., disguised in a realistic mask and a tactical vest to mimic a law enforcement officer, he arrived at the Champlin home of John and Yvette Hoffman.
A fake police uniform? That is terrifying.
It is. He knocked, claiming to be police. The deception quickly fell apart when the Hoffmans answered and the attacker opened fire. John was shot 9 times. Yvette was shot 8 times.
And in the middle of this chaos, their daughter, Hope, was present. As her parents actively tried to shield her, she managed to secure a door, lock it, and call 911.
Just incredible presence of mind.
The police responded within minutes. Her incredible composure under fire absolutely saved her parents' lives.
She acted with astonishing bravery. But unfortunately, the coordinated assault was not over. The attacker then attempted to visit the homes of two other lawmakers, Representative Kristen Bonner and Senator Ann Rest. Those attempts failed to make contact. Then, at roughly 3:30 a.m., he arrived at the Brooklyn Park home of Melissa and Mark Hortman. In that encounter, Melissa, Mark, and their dog, Gilbert, were fatally shot.
It's just devastating.
It really is. The attacker exchanged fire with responding police before escaping, which triggered a massive 40-hour manhunt before he was captured.
Wait, I need to stop you there and really look at the logistics of this. To execute something this coordinated across multiple cities, this wasn't random. How is it possible that a civilian could orchestrate such precise targeting of high-level officials?
Well, the preparation was extensive and deeply methodical. When authorities eventually searched his abandoned vehicle, they found a document they described as a hit list.
A literal hit list?
Yeah, it contained the names of nearly 70 targets. This list primarily focused on Democratic politicians and reproductive health care providers across the entire state.
Which immediately raises the question for me, how did he map out where all these people sleep at night? If you are listening to this and you think your home address is hidden because you have an unlisted number or a private social media profile, think again.
Yeah, the sources confirm he used 11 different data broker websites to locate the home addresses of his victims. He essentially purchased their vulnerability for a few dollars.
A few dollars? That is wild.
Right. Senator Ron Wyden has since been very vocal about this, stating that every American's safety is at risk until Congress cracks down on what he terms a sleazy industry.
You can think of data brokers like a reverse-engineered phone book.
Yep.
Instead of you looking up a name to find a number, these companies deploy algorithms to sweep up the digital crumbs you leave behind across the internet.
Yep, every little detail.
The zip code you enter at the gas pump, the shipping address for your online orders, the location permissions you blind accept on a weather app, public property tax records. They stitch all these seemingly disconnected data points together into a comprehensive profile, pin down your exact physical location, and just sell it to anyone with a credit card.
It's alarming. And that digital vulnerability really compounded a massive physical vulnerability at the state level. The aftermath of the attacks revealed severe gaps in Capitol security protocols.
How so?
Well, during the multi-hour window of the assaults, there was a catastrophic lack of communication between local municipal police departments and state agencies. Some lawmakers didn't even know there was an active threat or that their colleagues had been murdered until hours after the sun came up.
I mean, I have to challenge the premise of that communication breakdown. We were talking about 2025.
Right.
We have centralized 911 dispatch. We have massive state surveillance apparatuses.
You'd think so, yeah.
How does an active assassin drive between multiple cities, engaging with local police, without the state capitol police immediately locking down every official on that list?
It comes down to jurisdictional silos. You have the Champlin Police Department responding to the Hoffman residence, and the Brooklyn Park Police Department responding to the Hortman residence. These are entirely separate municipal dispatch systems. Unless a specific protocol triggers a real-time, statewide alert to the Capitol Protective Services, the dots just don't get connected immediately.
Wow.
An independent assessment by the Axtell Group found that while the human security staff were highly professional, the communication infrastructure they were forced to use was completely antiquated and fractured.
So the system was structurally blind to the broader pattern of the attack while it was actually happening.
Yes, exactly. And that realization led to Governor Tim Walz issuing Executive Order 26002 by January 2026. This mandated a massive security overhaul.
What did they change?
They established a dedicated State Patrol Protective Services unit specifically tasked with monitoring threats against lawmakers and constitutional officers. Furthermore, they installed AI weapons scanners at the Capitol entrances.
Which, just to clarify, are fundamentally different from the metal detectors we are all used to at airports.
Right, very different. Traditional magnetometers just beep when an electromagnetic field is disrupted by a certain mass of metal. It causes massive bottlenecks because people have to empty their pockets, take off belts, remove coats.
Right, it takes forever.
Exactly. The AI scanners use machine learning models paired with advanced sensors. They don't look for metal. They are trained on thousands of data points to identify the specific density, shape, and thermal signature of a weapon, even if it's broken down into parts inside a backpack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it allows the Capitol to remain an open, accessible public space while drastically increasing threat detection.
But, the systemic failures weren't just limited to data brokers selling addresses or police radios not talking to each other.
No, unfortunately not.
There was a deeply troubling, entirely different kind of systemic failure in the days that followed. And before we get into this, I want to be very explicit with you, the listener.
Yes, this is an important point.
What we are about to discuss involves highly charged, national political figures. Our goal here is absolutely not to take a political side, left or right. We are impartially reporting the facts documented in our sources to illustrate the mechanics of how misinformation compounds a real-world human tragedy.
Right. The context of the information ecosystem here is vital. In the wake of the shootings, instead of a unified period of state mourning, a completely baseless conspiracy theory began to gain massive traction online.
Right.
According to sources, President Trump shared videos on his social media platform pushing a narrative that Governor Walz had Melissa Hortman assassinated over a specific healthcare vote regarding undocumented immigrants.
Which honestly falls apart the second you look at the actual public voting record.
Exactly.
John Hoffman voted the complete opposite way on that exact same bill, and he was targeted by the exact same attacker on the exact same night. The logic of the conspiracy theory contradicts its own foundational claim.
The factual basis was completely non-existent, yet the algorithm-driven spread was rapid. DFL lawmakers, the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which is the Democratic Party affiliate in Minnesota, heavily condemned the lies.
Understandably.
Yeah. Representative Zach Stevenson called the amplification of these rumors by former president brutal and cruel.
But the most devastating response didn't come from a politician. It came from Melissa and Mark's son, Colin Hortman.
Yeah.
He had to step forward publicly while grieving the murder of both of his parents to plead for the fake news to stop. He issued a statement saying, "My father and mother were killed by a man who believed conspiracy theories and fake news. Words matter. Sharing fake news is dangerous."
It really highlights a tragic modern reality. A family is forced to fight a secondary battle against a fabricated digital narrative while trying to process an unimaginable physical loss.
Yeah.
It demonstrates that the threat to public servants is actively fueled by an information ecosystem where engagement algorithms prioritize sensational lies over objective truth, even at the expense of a grieving family.
So what does this all mean? It shows us that the threat to public servants isn't just physical, it's digital, and it's fueled by a broken information ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Which pivots us from the toxic environment that enabled the attack to the profound resilience of the people who survived it. Let's look at how the community and the survivors navigated the legal and physical aftermath.
Right.
The attacker was apprehended and indicted by a federal grand jury on 6 charges, including murder and attempted murder. Because he targeted public officials, he faces potential capital punishment.
The legal machinery is executing its process. But the true weight of that courtroom isn't found in the reading of the charges. It is found in the presence of Yvette Hoffman. She attended a federal court hearing and bravely stood to address the room. She stated, "Today, I look into the face of the man who tried to destroy my family. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. I carried with me the loss of Melissa and Mark Hortman and Gilbert, but we are still here. We will not be defined by hate. We will honor them by choosing strength, justice, and hope."
Refusing to be defined by hate after being shot 8 times is, it's a level of fortitude that is hard to even comprehend.
It really is.
And that emotional strength is physically mirrored in John Hoffman's recovery. The man survived 9 gunshot wounds. He spent 3 weeks fighting for his life in the ICU.
Yeah.
Months later, in November, he had to undergo a grueling 9-hour surgery just to repair the lingering catastrophic damage to his kidney, bladder, and colon.
The physical toll of the trauma is staggering, yet his spirit remained intact. In his first interview following the shooting, he actually deployed humor as a coping mechanism.
Really?
Yeah, he joked that since the only other person he knew who survived 9 gunshot wounds was the rapper 50 Cent, his new nickname in the Senate should be the 50 Senator.
That is, wow. It's a remarkable psychological defense. It makes me think of work hardening in metallurgy.
Oh, how so?
Well, when you subject certain metals to extreme structural stress or impact, the crystalline structure of the metal doesn't just shatter. It actually realigns and compresses to become denser, harder, and more resistant to future deformation. The trauma physically changes the composition of the material to make it stronger.
That structural metaphor perfectly captures February 17th, 2026. On that day, Senator John Hoffman, made his official return to the Minnesota Senate floor.
That must have been incredible.
It was. He was escorted up the Capitol steps by the exact same state troopers who had stood guard outside his hospital room for months.
He walked into that chamber to a massive bipartisan standing ovation.
He delivered an 8-minute speech that synthesized everything he had endured and observed. He told his colleagues, "When you survive an attempted assassination, you look at the world differently. The noise fades and that posturing fades. What remains is what is truly important: family, community, and the responsibility that we have to care for one another." He urged the entire chamber to prove through their legislative actions, not just their rhetoric, that democracy is stronger than fear.
His return to governance, his absolute refusal to be intimidated out of his life's work, serves as a living, breathing tribute to Melissa Hortman. Because the work of governing is exactly what she gave her life for.
Exactly.
And that brings us to her lasting legacy. She didn't just occupy a seat in the legislature for 2 decades. She fundamentally transformed the legal and environmental landscape of Minnesota.
Her legislative record is monumental. She was the key leader who shepherded the PRO Act, that is the Protect Reproductive Options Act, which statutorily codified reproductive rights as a fundamental right under state law.
Right.
Furthermore, she pushed the state to commit to a mandate of 100% carbon-free electricity by the year 2040.
She also passed comprehensive paid family and medical leave, structurally ensuring that Minnesotans wouldn't be forced into the impossible choice between keeping their livelihood and caring for a sick child. She passed crucial gun safety measures, too, including universal background checks and red flag laws.
And it is important to note the mechanics of those red flag laws. They create a civil legal mechanism known as an extreme risk protection order, allowing family members or law enforcement to petition a court to temporarily remove firearms from individuals who are deemed in imminent danger to themselves or others.
She was a policy giant. But here's where it gets really interesting. What is equally important to the laws she passed is the methodology she used to pass them.
Right, the how.
We discussed the 67 to 67 tie and her decision to share power. Even her staunchest political rivals recognized her unique character. Republican Speaker Lisa DeMuth, who shared that power with her, publicly stated that Melissa's brand of leadership brought people in rather than shutting them out.
During her memorial, Governor Walz held up a copy of the book Getting to Yes. It was a book on negotiation that Hortman had gifted to him and a Republican Senate Majority Leader.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, she used it as a practical tool to force productive conversations and avoid a government shutdown. She operated from a place of deep respect for the institution of democracy and the people within it, relying on science, evidence, and open dialogue, regardless of party affiliation.
And that is exactly why this matters to you, listening right now. We exist in a world saturated with cynical politics. It is incredibly easy to be overwhelmed by the polarization, the digital vitriol, the sheer hostility of the public square.
It really is.
But Melissa and Mark Hortman's dedication to service mentoring students, persisting through early political failures to do genuine good, is a blueprint. It proves that a life of impact, built on the premise of bringing people together rather than tearing them apart, is actually possible.
It underscores the ultimate failure of political terrorism. Violence can violently interrupt the life, but it cannot erase the infrastructure of progress.
No, it can't.
It cannot repeal the laws passed, unprotect the families relying on paid leave, reverse the environmental safeguards of clean energy, or dismantle the democratic norms upheld by the act of sharing power.
If the ultimate goal of an attacker is to silence voices, fracture societal trust, and break the mechanics of democracy, then the most powerful form of defiance isn't simply the legal sentence handed down in a federal courtroom.
Right.
It is the enduring, living, breathing impact of the victim's work.
True justice is the relentless continuation of the work they loved.
So as you think about the events of June 2025, don't focus on the orchestrator of the violence. Focus on the vibrant lives of Melissa and Mark Hortman and the metallurgical resilience of John and Yvette Hoffman. Ask yourself, how do we as a society and as individuals ensure that the legacy of those who serve outlives the extremism that tries to silence them?